Welcome. I'm Kristen, and this is the Simple, Handmade, Everyday podcast where I talk about living a creative, intentional life. I like to chat about quilting, knitting, what I'm reading and watching, and even a little bit about keeping a cozy, organized home. You can find me online at my blog, Simple, Handmade, Everyday at KristenEsser.com, or on Instagram at KristenEsser. I've got my cup of tea in hand, so let's settle in for a chat. Welcome to episode 17, the Thanksgiving Recovery Edition. So this is the week after Thanksgiving here in the U.S., and I had 15 people here for about a week. They roughly came in at different parts, and part of that 15 is my family too. But so it was a big family. That's a big family gathering for us. And it was great. It was so good to see my brothers and their kids and all the cousin time that was happening. And my dad came, and yeah, it was wonderful. And the actual Thanksgiving dinner came out well. The turkey was delicious. I had nothing to do with the turkey. Pies were great. Everything was great. So just still kind of straightening up the house, getting things back in order. And I was really glad that I did that kind of kitchen deep cleaning. Went through the refrigerator and the freezers and, all the important parts of the kitchen to feel like that was in a good place before things got crazy. And so I'm really glad to go into Christmas and the holidays here with kind of that as a foundation. I actually have my oven on self-cleaning right now because there was a bit of an apple pie overflowage. And so get that all taken care of. And I'm kind of excited to move from fall, which I don't feel like we really had, but into winter and the upcoming holidays. But I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of the podcast. So so the whole entertaining thing was imperfect, but still fun, and hopefully, it was more about the people than making sure that everything was technically perfect. So. My sister-in-law brought some fabric and a pattern for a Christmas quilt that she's working on that she bought after Christmas last year, which is kind of the perfect time to buy Christmas fabric, right, in some ways. And it was ugly sweater fabric from Sweetwater, and it was so cute. And so she brought a pattern, and we were able to, I was able to help her get stuff, cut out. Well, she did all the work. I just kind of explained what to do. But the quilt is basically, probably 16, maybe 20 churn dash blocks, and the center of the churn dash is a fussy cut ugly sweater. And it's just super cute. And so even though I had to basically break down my sewing area for Thanksgiving and entertaining, all those people, by the time we got around to doing the sewing, people were starting to filter out, and I was able to kind of reclaim it a little bit. And so that was really fun. It was really fun to help her kind of get that going and chat with her. I did some hand sewing while she was sewing, and then my couple of my nieces came down, dug into my scrap bin of mini charm squares, and they've got such an amazing color sense. Created some little 9 patches that they did, just hand sewed together. And it's really fun for me to just see kids who really don't have any hang-ups about accuracy just kind of go for it. You know what I mean? Just eyeballing everything and very instinctual color choices and color placements. And it kind of opened my eyes to how uptight I can really be about things like that, and that I could probably benefit from just, sort of loosening up a bit. So in addition to, just all the fun chatting and drinking lots of coffee and wine and sewing, I was able to kind of stumble upon a new configuration for my sewing area. So once I kind of took everything that was movable and brought it up to my bedroom to just kind of clear space, we turned the dining room table a different direction in the room to accommodate the leaf, so that it was longer, which then crowded it against this kind of sofa table / bookshelf that's against the back of the couch right there. So we moved that to another wall. It's just like a low bookshelf. And I've wondered for years what this bookshelf would look like over on the wall against the stairs. Turns out it looks really good and gives me more space in the sewing area. So that was really good. I really was tempted to leave the leaf in the table because, man, that is a really nice big workspace. But it does make that area quite a bit more crowded and didn't really leave me a place for the ironing board. So I don't know if I'll take a picture of it or not, but it kind of, it gave me the opportunity to freshen up the workspace and to rethink the organization of that space. I don't know if you can hear, my cat is behind me and he's like really wanting some attention. He's meowing hard. But so that was kind of fun. It was just like this sort of, unforeseen benefit of using that space differently for a few days was to reconfigure it. And I'm not sure I'm going to leave it there the way it is. I'm used to having this bookshelf behind the couch so that when I sit on the couch and sew or whatever, there is this table, the top of the bookshelf. It's low. It's a low and wide bookshelf made to go up against a couch. And it's a little table for me to set my drink. And, it's actually where I usually keep my camera and stuff. And so there's like not a good place to set my drink right now by that when I'm at that sewing on that couch. So we'll have to just figure that out. But just kind of ready to be headed into the next season here. I am sitting here drinking my Harney & Sons Dragon Jasmine Pearls tea, which is kind of my go-to tea in the mornings when I don't want a lot of more caffeine and don't want to think about it too hard. So I've talked about that one a lot. It's absolutely, green jasmine tea is one of my favorites. I hope you are drinking something kind of fun and cozy. We are still having some really warm weather. It's still in the high 70s at the high point of the day here in Southern California. In the mornings, it can be nice and, relatively chilly in the 50s, which is refreshing, but it's still heating up. So we're not into hot chocolate season yet, that's for sure. I do want to take a second right now to thank a few people who left reviews. First of all, I forgot to mention in the last podcast, Dog Walking Mama left a wonderful review. It's so fun to read these reviews and listen to people talk about me in the third person. So, and I'm so glad that that you guys are liking the podcast. I always feel a little insecure when I put it out there, but I just really do want it to be like just having a little chat with friends over, coffee or tea, and let's just talk about crafting and books and shows and life and what it's like to just be a mom and a wife and a maker, this day and age. So also CLE Baldwin and Mac MH. Thank you so much for leaving reviews. I read every single one of them and screenshot them and text them to my friends. So thank you so much. All right, so let's get into quilting. Basically, the only thing that I have been sewing lately is the quilt that Patty and I designed for the hand-pieced quilt along. So a lot of people have been asking, to see the quilt, and to be honest with you, I'm not even done with mine yet. So the quilt along doesn't start until January, so this is my time to sew. I, at this point, finished up the blocks. I did the sashing during Thanksgiving, sitting at the big extended table with my sister-in-law at the sewing machine and my two nieces sitting there hand sewing. I started doing the sashing, and now I am halfway done with the borders. So I've done 2 of the 4 borders. So I actually need to cut and sew the other ones. Man, do I love sewing, hand sewing, sashing, and borders to blocks because it's so easy. And even though I am a person that likes to mark my seam allowances on every piece of fabric, I've kind of learned I don't do that when I'm doing sashing because I like to hand sew on the side of the block that's the most complicated, that's got the most things going on. Because of the way you hand sew through seam allowances, I want the most seam allowances on the top. So, obviously a piece of sashing or borders doesn't have, there's nothing going on there. So that can very easily go on the back side of the work. Does that make sense? The only problem with doing a lot of hand sewing when you're talking to other people is that if I had been paying a little closer attention, I would have done things a little bit differently. I laid out this quilt in EQ8 and I plugged the fabrics in and kind of played around with my fabric choices in EQ8 and printed that out as reference. But as I was sewing, I made a few different choices here and there, of colors or the different prints and things like that. And so when I went to sew it together, and I paid a lot of attention in the design phase of the balance of the quilt. As a matter of fact, I even had to change a block because it was a little too empty. We had to add some little corner units on it to make it not look out of place. So I had this printed out as reference. And so when I sat down at this, very full table of people sewing to do the sashing, which I'd already pre-cut, I just looked at my EQ8 printout for reference, for which pieces I needed to sew the sashing onto. And I didn't really lay the whole thing out and look at it, kind of forgetting that it didn't actually look like this printout anymore. And so I just, sewed them together and sewed them into rows and, just did the whole thing. And then when after I pressed it and, photographed it, I was like, oh man, like up here in the right-hand corner, there's kind of a clumping of this type of fabric, like it was okay. The color was okay. It's just that it was a little too much of a single fabric. And that just kind of happened in a few places where I was like, oh, if I had really been paying closer attention, I would have maybe swapped out these blocks a little differently. So, but at this point, there was no way I was going to pick it out. So what it is just going to be, what it's going to be is a little reminder to me that you need to pay attention when you're getting that final quilt top together. And it doesn't look horrible or anything like that. And if I wasn't telling you, you might not notice. But in case you do notice, I want you to know that I saw it too. So that has been so much fun. I've got, I think, a pretty much permanent callus on my middle finger from the finger pricking. It doesn't get sore anymore because that callus is really building up. And as I'm kind of finishing the top, I'm starting to think about how I want to hand quilt it, because obviously it has to be hand quilted, right? They're blocked with a lot of pieces, so I'm just trying to figure out, just kind of mulling that over, and whether I want to kind of trace a traditional design on it, like, I don't know, what's it called? I want to call it a Baptist fan, is that right? We're just kind of like these concentric semicircles that kind of pile up on each other, or if I just want to go a 1/4 inch inside each of maybe even just the background pieces, what might be enough quilting. So I don't know. So I'm kind of thinking about that. I'm also thinking about my plans for 2019. So I pulled out my quilter's planner, and I think I'm going to do something a little bit crazy for me, and that is, I think I'm going to use my quilter's planner as my paper calendar this year. So every year I buy a paper calendar. I do use Google Calendar, and I rely heavily on it, especially for recurring activities, that you don't want to write down every week, and I use it to set alerts so that I don't forget things. But it has been my way to have a paper calendar just open on the counter, like kind of by our telephone and where that kind of stuff is kept. And the calendar I used, I'm going to bend down and pick it up. I've used it for years, is from the Peter Popper Press, and it's called the 18-month family calendar. This is the family calendar. The other one, it used to be called the mom's calendar, and the only difference is that it already had pre-printed the word mom in this part I'm going to talk about now. So this, when you open it up, it's a full week, and there are 5. Each day is split into 5 columns, and the first one usually is printed mom. Now that's just empty because this is the family calendar. Say mom, and this worked perfectly for me because then I had a column for my 3 kids, for Chloe, Jonah, and Ben, and then an empty one, which is where I always put my meal plan. So what I'm saying is that this every day is broken up into these columns for each person. So as Ben has an orthodontist appointment, I will just put it in his column. Like right now, I've got his soccer schedule and his drum lessons and, all those, orthodontist appointments, all those sorts of things. And everybody was very much in the habit of looking down and looking at, what might be on their schedule for the day. And then, and that's where everybody goes to look for what's for dinner that night. This is where I write what we're having for dinner. And it's just, it's just like yesterday says chicken noodle soup, bread, and salad. That's it. And then I have my own column. And I never really color-coded it because you didn't have to, because I know some people do that, but everybody had their own column. Well, my life is changing, and let's just say that Chloe and Jonah, my 2 kids who are away in college, their columns are very sadly empty. So this is just, I love it, and I've used it for 10 plus years, and I save my old calendars. And when I'm getting a little bit stuck meal planning, I will pull out old calendars and see what were we eating last year or 2 years ago or 5 years ago at this time, and go, oh my gosh, that is a recipe that's fallen out of rotation. So anyways, I think that maybe I am going to I'm not going to use that calendar this year. I've got this lovely quilter's planner. I'm pulling that off the table right now. And it also has a monthly spread, just like my regular calendar, and a weekly spread. I love a weekly spread because I'm so visual. I need to see that. And so they just have a column. It's sort of oriented differently. The column is for each day. And there's room for, there's like 3 must-dos at the top. And then, it has a list of like the numbers 6 through 9, sort of 6 a.m. through 9 p.m., which I will, I might jot in like when an appointment is there. But I can definitely like just carve out a place at the bottom of each day here. That's where I'm going to write my menu plan. There's space along the bottom of this for personal to-do list, a quilting to-do list, shopping list, and notes. I could even do the meal plan. No, I like the meal plan on the per day. And there's a habit tracker, which I could really use for things like making sure I take my vitamins or drinking enough water. So I think I'm gonna use this. And what I really like here is I have a bullet journal where I really knock out my daily to-do list, but these little areas on the bottom of this for the to-do list and the notes can be just where you sort of just jot those things that are at the top of your mind that need to get really, rolled into like the plan for the day or something. So anyways, I'm going to use the Quilter's Planner. I am also getting excited about, filling out the things I want to get done. Because one of my goals for 2019 is to quilt all the quilts. I have quite a backlog of quilts that are pieced and basted and ready to be quilted, and I'm just feeling a little intimidated by it. And part of it is that for all the practice I've done, I'm still a very insecure free motion quilter. I'm even thinking about backtracking a bit on my Moda Bake Shop quilt, which is, in my opinion, ginormous. It's like 73 inches squared. And I was totally planning on free motioning it using the plans that Holly Ann did over at String and Story. She did this great series of blog posts where she gave quilting plans for sort of a easy, medium, hard, different levels of quilting ability. And I was totally thinking about doing that. And maybe I still will. But at this point, there's part of me that just wants to straight line quilt that whole sucker. But, I say that because right now that seems easier, but in reality, I know that straight line quilting is not, in fact, easier. I've actually never really done a whole quilt that was just straight line quilted. I do know that the more lines you have, the less you see the imperfections, but that seems kind of really intimidating and possibly a little boring to quilt such a big quilt, straight lines. I'm tempted to do my organic wavy lines because I love that, but I just don't think that it fits this quilt. I'd almost like to give it to a long armor, but it's already basted. So anyways, I really want to do that. I want to get caught up on that quilting. I feel like it's hanging over my head, and I don't like that. The other thing I really want to do is, well, I've already talked a million times about the Rooftop Wonders quilt that I want to make for my son Ben, but beyond that, I want to play. I want to get back to playing in the sewing room, having an idea, seeing if it works out, toss it in the scrap bin if it doesn't, and just quilt without so much of an agenda. And one of the things that I want to explore in that vein is a book I got for Christmas or my birthday last year called The Improv Handbook for Modern Quilters, a guide to creating, quilting, and living courageously. So this is a book that's got a message that's, I basically need to hear. And so I've pulled that out today and I was looking at it. It is written by Sherry Lynn Wood, and I will definitely put a link in the show notes. But basically, she looks at approaching, like playing around as like a musical score. And so she actually calls them scores. And she will create like, okay, so like she's got, I don't want to call it a pattern, a suggestion called, I think the first one's maybe called floating squares or something. And then in that score, she gives you some limiting factors, like limit your color choices to 3 choices, or limit your shapes to this. Because with improv, if everything is on the table all the time, it's too overwhelming, and often it doesn't really look good. Whenever I see improv quilts, I'm really drawn to the ones where they've used like 2 colors. And even if they're kind of like the shapes are wacky, the limited color palette really speaks to me. Or if it's more of an unlimited color palette, but they're all strings or squares or something, then that kind of speaks to me. So that's the idea. And then within that framework, whatever you've chosen, however you've decided you wanted to sort of limit your design, then she has these other adaptations where you can kind of further refine those about how you are assembling the quilt top, or I don't know, just other factors like that. And I just have really been wanting to dig in and play with this, and I just haven't. So I want to carve out time to just play, discover new color combinations that I like, set aside accuracy for a while, and just cut things freeform with scissors and just sew them together and look at what I have and then decide how I want to proceed, just kind of design on the fly and be completely okay with the fact that none of this needs to become a quilt that I actually quilt and use, even that like it's okay that I don't like it. How many canvases are out there for painters that never really see the light of day because it just didn't work out? You don't see the hundreds of sketches that went into it. And that's kind of just where I want to take my quilting, I think, a little bit this year is basically just to play more. Okay, that kind of just wraps up what I'm thinking. And man, I've really gone on and on about that, but that kind of wraps up what I'm thinking about quilting. Now, on to what's on my needles, which is still striped socks. At this point, everybody should just always have a pair of socks on the needles. That's how I feel. I'm not knitting anything ambitious. My plans for Norway that never worked out are still sort of sting in the back of my head. So whenever I get sick of hand sewing, I just set it aside and pull out the knitting needles. So, that it's so nice to have kind of 2 crafts like that I can sort of switch between and not feel any pressure about. The other thing that I really need to get, as another break, another thing I should set up is my sewing machine for quilting, so that once my fingers are sore from hand sewing, I can, do some this actual quilting on my machine, which I feel like is getting a little dusty. I need to get back to that. And then at night, just to keep me awake while we're watching that last TV show as a family at night, just pull out the knitting needles for that. Let's talk about books. I was thinking that I did not have a lot to say about books since our last podcast, but I've got a whole lot of notes here. So let's see. Once I finished my audiobook for Y is for Yesterday, which I talked about on the last podcast, which I enjoyed very much, and I really need to go dig out a few more Sue Graftons and to make sure that I have listened to or read every single one of them. I wasn't really sure where to go. I do have, books on my Kindle that I hadn't gotten to, and I even had a few library books, but I was feeling a little uninspired. So I revisited a book that I never quite finished that I talked about on the podcast called Bookshop on the Corner by Jenny Colgan. I was, 3/4 of the way through that, so I just had to knock it off. And I've seen a few people online who read it. It was okay. On my notes here, it says meh. It was okay. It was a little predictable. It's one of those little cozy books, and I think I got it for 99 cents, so I don't regret reading it, but I can't give it a full-fledged endorsement. The book that I think I'm going to start today, so I kind of hesitate to talk about books that I haven't read, but I'm going to, is The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. I haven't read a lot of books by Kristen Hanna, but I did read The Nightingale maybe 2 years ago and loved it. And so I saw The Modern Mrs. Darcy. She's so good to get book recommendations from, like almost too many book recommendations, but every once in a while when she posts in her stories that the Amazon deals are really good that day, I often check it out, and I almost always end up buying something. So I did that yesterday for The Great Alone by Chris and Hannah. It was available on Kindle for $2.99. I am recording this on November 27th, 2018, and I checked this morning, and it is in fact still $2.99. So that information is probably going to be outdated by the time you listen to it, but I thought I would just throw that out there. So that is going to be the next book I tackle. I'm very excited about that. I am listening to an audiobook on Libby. Again, thank you to all the people who told me about the Libby app and how fun and easy it is to get audiobooks from libraries. And I live in a place that has a lot of independent libraries, and I have a library card for every one of them. So all of a sudden, I feel like my choices are so much bigger than they used to be. I am listening to The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. This is my first book by Neil Gaiman, although I think that I've seen movies that have been adapted from his books. He reads this. He is a very good reader with a wonderful British accent. I am not that far into it, so I will have to reserve judgment. I think I'm on chapter 5, and it's early days here, but I'm liking it very much. I really like his style of writing, and it's a little bit fantasy. I'm totally loving that. So let me know if you've read that. I'm really enjoying that. One thing that I am super excited about is the new Inspector Gamache book by Louise Penny is out this week. And the second it came out, I put it on my wish list for Christmas. I will restrain myself. I want to go simple on Christmas this year, which I say every single year. But after my big trip, I just, I kind of feel like that is Christmas, birthday, Mother's Day all rolled into one when I got to go to Norway. So I just need a few fun things, books for the kids to get me or something. So The Kingdom of the Blind is the new Louise Penny book, and I am super excited to read that. I flew through that whole series last year, and I almost want to start over and read them again. I won't quite do that yet. But so very excited about that. I have no idea if it's any good, but I will read it no matter what. And the other book that's on my mind right now is Winter Solstice by Rosamund Pilcher. I've talked about her before. She's one of my favorite authors that I discovered on Amazon back when I was completely obsessed with Maeve Binchy. And it was one of those, if you like Maeve Binchy, then you might like Rosamund Pilcher, which I do. I don't like a lot of her early books, but starting with The Shell Seekers and forward, I've loved them all. And one of them is called Winter Solstice. This is one of these weird Kristen quirks where I reread this book almost every year at Christmas time. It is my Christmas book, and it takes place around Christmas in the book, which is why I do this. And it's a wonderful story. I don't want to tell you too much about it, but in the Rosamund Pilcher way, the story revolves around a house. Like I've mentioned this before, that I feel like houses are characters in her books, which I love. Her books always inspire me in my homemaking. It always makes me want to sit down and have a cup of tea. And there's something about the way she's describing kitchens with the scrubbed oak table and the tea kettle on the Aga stove, and frying up bacon and eggs and sausages every morning. There's something about the way she talks about it that I find so appealing. The way in this book they kind of, throw together a Christmas gathering that is how I feel that social gatherings should be, that sort of, it all comes together very naturally without a lot of stress, but in a really fun way. So anyways, I don't want to give too much away about the book. I really enjoy it, and it just kind of gets me in that holiday spirit. And I can, so at this point, I can picture the town that this takes place in my mind. And sometimes when I'm going to sleep and I'm having a hard time getting to sleep, I literally close my eyes and I picture the little town square, and I kind of mentally walk through this town. That she's described it so perfectly, and I never get very far, and then I'm asleep. So there's something like just super calming. I know that's another weird Christian quirk. So yeah, so that's kind of my list of books. Again, I'll put a whole list in the show notes if you're interested at all. The other thing that I'm watching, or watched rather, I talked about last episode. It's called Jamestown. It's on PBS. It was early days on that one a couple weeks ago, but now it's 2 weeks later, and I have watched all of season 1 and 2. So now I can endorse it. I do enjoy it. It's no Downton Abbey, but the characters really grow on you. It gives you a perspective at this time in history that I didn't really have before, and what it was truly like to live here when we were first, when people were first settling in the U.S. So if you can get that on your PBS station. Oh, actually, no, I lied. I've binged all of season 1 and only the first one of season 2. Weirdly, I only have access to the first episode. Usually, as soon as it comes out, I have access to all of them, but I don't. I was definitely excited to watch season 2, so that continues to have my full endorsement. On the homemaking side of things, I've got on my mind what I bet you do too, and that is the holidays coming up. I like a little bit of space between my holidays. And no shame on anyone who sets their Christmas tree up the day after Thanksgiving or the day after Halloween, for that matter, which I feel like I've seen a lot of that. I actually kind of like where Thanksgiving was this year. I felt it was a little bit early, and I don't really get going into the Christmas shopping or anything until after Thanksgiving. So I feel like I have an extra week this year. Sometimes it's 3 weeks and I go straight into panic mode. But it's 4 weeks this year, and so I feel like I've got a little bit more space. And because we had guests, I wasn't able to get all the Christmas stuff down after Thanksgiving. Often the weekend after Thanksgiving, we pull the stuff out of the attic so that I can kind of start. But that didn't happen. That's okay, because the first weekend, or the second weekend after Thanksgiving, this coming weekend, is the 1st of December, which I feel is very appropriate to start Christmas decorating. And I kind of stumbled onto a method of doing this last year that I would like to recreate this year. And that is, I put up the Christmas tree. We have a fake Christmas tree because I have to be honest with you. We did the whole take the kids and cut down a tree and bring it back and set it up. That is a wonderful experience. It has never panned out for me. It is that is a fantasy experience. In reality, we can never find a good tree, and the trees scratching up the paint on the car, and it makes a mess when we drag it in. Somebody invariably spills the water. We've actually had to have sections of carpet replaced because all the gross water spilled on it, and then if you get it too early, it starts dropping needles. The cat's drinking the water and the thing. None of this is appealing to me, but a beautiful, good quality, pre-lit with all white lights tree is right up my alley. So I can pull that out of the box, have that set up in 5 minutes, and then just leave it like that for a while. And it is so pretty. I just love sitting in the morning by the light of the Christmas tree. But we did not even decorate that tree until I think Chloe came home from college last year, which was maybe a week before Christmas. And I just really liked having just this plain lit tree up. So that's going to be the first thing I do. I'm going to put that up. And this year, I'm in the very luxurious position for me to pull the stuff out of the attic and leave it in. We have an unoccupied bedroom right now, which is Chloe's room. I can, kind of stage all the Christmas stuff in there, which normally I can't. It's usually in the hallway or piled up in the garage or something. And then I think I would just really like to slowly decorate over the course of a week. And one thing that I've really learned that I like, and again, this is 20 years in the making, is I love putting garlands. And these are just fake garlands from Target. They're not, we have no access to any real garlands. I like putting garlands over doorways. So I put it over the, garland over the door, front door, outside and inside. We have French doors. I put a garland over that. I don't think I did one over the kitchen window last year, but I'm doing it this year. Just basically any window that can handle it, I'm putting a garland because it's so easy, but somehow that looks so Christmassy. Garlands and lights, just those little $2.99 lights from Target, putting those over windows. To me, it's like this amazing transformation that kind of looks more wintry than Christmassy. And I often leave the lights up, even when I break down the Christmas decorations. I leave those, I call them winter decorations, and I leave them up for a while because I really like to kind of light up these little areas when it's darker in the winter. So I want to do, and then I wrap we have a staircase, and I wrap the banisters with that. And that, to me, if I just did that in the tree, I would kind of be okay. In the stockings, that would almost be enough. So I think that I'm going to really kind of look at all the little knick-knacky Christmas things, which are adorable, and I have, collected over years, but I'm going to examine them a little more closely this year to decide how much of that stuff I really want to put out and see if I can edit that down a little bit. I might get some pushback from the kids who are used to seeing, all those little knick-knacky things from their childhood, but I'm going to play around with that and see if I can simplify the decorations and really hone in on the things that make the house feel really festive. And some of this thinking is influenced by this class that I watched. I've talked about the Cozy Minimalist Home. I haven't done that blog post about the redo on the family room, which I'm still really happy about. But when I bought that book, I got these classes that are seasonal. So there's one for fall, winter, spring, and summer. And I watched the winter one, and she talks about, again, I don't want to give too much away. They're very affordable classes, and they're like, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes or something. And it just gives you some stuff to think about. But she talks about, as you decorate seasonally, instead of a bunch of store-bought decor, think about your senses, sight, sound, taste, and smell, and touch, like in terms of textures. And so a lot of what makes a house festive is having some music on, and the seasonal things that you're cooking, the Christmas cookies, and even just doing kind of one of those, simmering spices on your stove, so that there's more to it than just a lot of knickknacks, So that's also what I really want to get some Christmas. I'm looking forward to getting some Christmas music playing and to start cooking some things. I just made soup with the turkey stock from our Thanksgiving dinner, and for dinner last night. And then we went for a walk. When I came back, I walked in and I said, "Oh, it smells like soup," and I love it. Just those sort of things that create a home more than just how it's decorated. I'm sure I'll talk more about holiday celebrations and Christmas and how that's panning out for us as we go. But I think that's it for today. So thanks again for joining me. I hope that you are, enjoying sliding into the holiday season, whatever that means for you. And I hope you've had a wonderful time just sitting here and hopefully sipping something fun to drink. And we'll see you next time.